Let's go live. This is going to be a super fun episode. Last week, we broke down how you can hire and retain superstar employees, right? At the heart of every single company of what it is that we do, it's our employees that get us to higher and higher levels. And so I think it's super important that we look at how we get people into the business, how we invite them on the mission, if you will. And I don't know that I have any other case study that is better than this one than Matt Foxhall, an amazing culture changer. And so I love the story, which I'm going to let him tell, but it's the whole notion of you work your whole career to get to incredible opportunities, and then suddenly the opportunity comes your way and it's not exactly as advertised. And so sometimes when you walk into companies, no different than we do it as employees, we do the same thing as senior leaders, and sometimes it's not always as advertised. So anyway, we are going to talk with Matt. We'll bring him in. Just a reminder, we now have 48 people that have joined the private Facebook group, The Best Places to Lead. So I would tell you, if you have not joined us over there, join us. We'll get ready to start having conversations, but we get private clips of people who have come in and given great insights to everything that we're doing. And so I would tell you, jump in over there. And then next week, we have Katie McLaughlin. She is going to break down for us, continuing this whole notion of leaders and employees and how we create these compelling companies that outperform. And she's going to talk about how deliberate leaders create really engaged teams. So she has a great backstory, and she calls it the McLaughlin method, which is super fun. So without further ado, Mike Hines is back in the room too. My real #1 super fan, Rachel, is here. Thank you, sweetheart. It's great to see you. And so Matt, let's get into it, man. The thing that I love and the story that I want you to tell today, why I wanted to have you on the show, is you had this dream of becoming a regional CEO for a Fortune 250 company. You did it a couple years early. They sold you on a dream to come to Jacksonville, Florida, and you're going to run this incredible division for the company. And then you got here, and what did you find out?
Man, that is a heck of a tee up. I'm going to have to leave everybody guessing for 1 second while I just give some love to Jerry McNamara. Like, I feel like there are super successful people that I've met in business, but I feel like this is different. You know, when I first met Jerry, his resume was unbelievable. I mean, all of you know this, right? Ultimate CEO, run and sold and built, multiple companies. And I think that's why we all show up, right? Every week, right? Is to gain some insights into, Jerry and what he's built, not only professionally, but also personally. But here's the thing. It is so rare, I feel like, to find a coach that really cares. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like there are people out there that trade knowledge for dollars, and that's great. Like, that's a transactional business, right? Like, we meet for 48 minutes, right? And then I'm getting on to another call in 2 minutes, and then I go on to the next call. That is not my experience over the last probably 4 years working with Jerry. He sits on my board of directors. That's definitely a Jerry term, right? So you think about the people in your life that mean the most to you, but that give it to you straight. They're your cheerleaders when you need to be lifted up, but they're also the people that give it to you straight, right? When you need someone to look at it from that angle. And I am just so grateful, Jerry. And like, I love this because I have all of these people's captive attention, unless they drop off, but all of their captive attention to know how much I love you, brother. Like,
thanks, man.
You changed my life over these last couple of years. So I want to start with that. All right.
Thanks.
So,
feelings mutual.
Yeah. These people are like showing up. They're like, is this really what we're going to have to go through for this next hour? No. Okay. So yes, like, life was going good. One of the things that one of the mentors that I had really early on in my life said that you should write down 101 lifetime goals, things that you want to do in your lifetime. And so there were like 50 people in this training, and I think 3 people actually took that recommendation. So I wrote down 100 things. Now, listen, you can write probably 20 pretty easy. Like, I want to make sure that I keep the tree in the backyard alive. Like I want to make a certain amount of money. I want to, all of these things. But then you start getting to like 50 and you get to like crazy stuff, right? Like I want a safari in Africa for 3 weeks. One of those goals was to get to a level within my previous life, my old world, to a certain title, right? By the age of 35. And wouldn't you know it, I actually got that opportunity at the age of 35, right? So I don't know, maybe it's a plug for writing down your goals. But so I moved my young family from San Antonio, Texas. Now listen, I'm from Texas. My wife's from Texas. Everybody that I know is from Texas, right? So we moved our young family. I remember being on a Zoom in the sort of early days, talking to my 3-month-old daughter, thinking to myself, have I just made like one of the biggest mistakes? Like I'm moving my entire life to the other side of the United States, Jacksonville, Florida. We didn't know anybody in Jacksonville, Florida, but I was going for an opportunity. And when I got there, yes, it wasn't all that it was cracked up to be. My first day, right? Like, first of all, that morning I was staying, anybody seen like You, Me, and Dupree, that movie from way back? I was Dupree. I was staying on the couch of a guy that I had played soccer with in Jacksonville, super nice. I woke up that morning, right? Because I'm like, I got to get up. I got to go for a run. So I woke up at 4 a.m. He's got 3 daughters. I woke them all up, right? I set the alarm off that morning. So you're like, first day, I set the alarm off. I get to the office, my first meeting of the day, I had a VP walk in, and man, like this was like sold to me like, this is an amazing opportunity, right? Like, so you move your whole family there. First day, VP walks into my office and I said, yeah, come on in. Like, let's sit down. He takes his resume and he slams it on the desk. I'm like, holy cow. Like this is the way that the meeting's going to start. He says, that is the resume of a winner. And I'm like, oh, good to know. So anyway, he would actually quit. He was looking for me to give him a recommendation, right, to a new opportunity, which was fine. And all that work within the first year had me in my office, overlooking the St. Johns River, crying in my office. I'm not embarrassed. There's a lot of strangers here, but I'm telling you that because, as you all know, leading organizations or being an entrepreneur, being in the role that you're in, if you're here, like shit gets hard every once in a while. Isar, I'm sorry, your son is like right there. I promise I won't use that language all of today. But so I was crying in my office. And all of that, right? Like that, all of the hard stuff that had to happen in that first year, the report came out from our company. We got dead last in the company. So there were 40 sort of units, right? Within that system, we were dead last, 40th out of 40. So yeah, that's how that first couple months went.
So that wonderful opportunity had nowhere to go but up, Matt.
That's right.
That's really the part that they forgot to tell you about. Like you can only bring it up.
That's right.
And so, so you walk in and you've got to be thinking like, what have I gotten myself into? And so I think one of the things that you have to think about as a leader is, what's my approach here? Am I going to play the short game and make short-term decisions and create some change? Or am I playing the infinite game? I'm playing this to win over the long term, to build a sustainable, compelling company. What were you thinking about? Because, the environment that you're in, it's very performance driven. And so,
Jerry,
what were you thinking?
This is after I stopped crying?
Yeah. Yes,
yeah.
After you stopped crying.
So as I recovered from that, right, I started to reflect on, okay, like I can do this, right? I mean, our experiences up to these point in our lives give us, if we can focus on them, give us the strength, right, to go through obstacles. I mean, I got a coin on my desk that I look at literally every day. It says the obstacle is the way. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Now, that's like motivational, but here's the thing, like Jerry and I use this analogy all the time, right? So if we're farmers, right, you said the short game and the long game. So if we're farmers, we have to decide whether we're going to take a conventional farming approach, which is much like, how do I get the most pesticides into the ground that I possibly can to get the most beautiful fruit in the shortest amount of time, right? I mean, nothing against conventional farmers, but like Their job is to get the best looking fruit and vegetables into the store that they can sell it at the highest price. The organic farmer actually takes a different approach. They say, okay, listen, this is going to be really hard, but in order to get that seal of approval, right? The seal that we all see when we shop at Whole Foods and it says organic, that actually is a process that started 3 years ago. And it was that farmer deciding that that plot of land or whatever they were going to be producing is no pesticides, right? Like they're out there at 5 a.m. every morning with their team that all believes that there's something bigger, right, about this. It isn't getting the highest prices, but it's that they believe, right, what they're doing is meaningful and fulfilling work, right? And listen, every week that farmer goes to the farmer's market, right, and gets like they're doing an organic process and approach, but they can only sell it for conventional prices. Are you with me? So when we go back to my situation, right, as I got my head like up above, like, holy cow, okay, here's what we got to do. We got to come out with a compelling vision, right? Because the people in the organization, some were great. Some are like, good friends. I was on the phone with some of them earlier today. They're amazing. Most weren't. And so what we had to do, right, is we had to promote them to new careers and then get really clear on what our vision was going to be over that 4-year time frame. And then once we were clear on it, then we could start communicating it out there, which led to a lot of success over the next 4 years, certainly by way of recognition, but like it's the people, right? I mean, that's the most fun. When I think about those times, I send text to all of those people during those times, telling them, you remember this? You remember that? Because it's all about, well, I don't know. The thing that I think about a lot is if we can go to work every day, loving the work that we're doing, but probably more importantly, doing it with other compelling people that we want to go to battle with and go to work with. Like, is there anything? Oh, and then the last part, can we be aligned with values for the company that we represent or the company that we are all building? And if we can hit those 3 things, man, that's when I've found the most joy in the work that I'm doing. So that's a long answer. Did I hit some of it?
I think you're doing great, right? And I think it comes back to, when I think about the business acceleration model, which I broke down, I think in episode 3, the foundation of every great company starts with vision, values, and then resources. What resources do we have to invest to create success for the company? And I see this time and time and time again. I get to see lots of companies over time. The ones that are blowing like a leaf in the wind and are not very compelling. And you say like, well, what's the mission that you're on? What is energizing your people? And they say, well, I don't know. We do create widgets, right? There is nothing to galvanize the company together, whether it's through clarity of the vision or clarity of the values, which is really the operating system. And so many companies miss the mark on that. And I think it's something that you did really brilliantly in installing that. Tell us what you had installed as the vision for the company. What was that rocket ship that you were inviting people to come on?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jer. So as you said, right, the vision is where we're going. And I think, when we're trying to be a magnet to talent that's out there, they have to want to jump into that vision with you, right? And so our business is the financial services business. And it's an old and tired industry, quite frankly. I mean, and some of you might be thinking, wow, that sounds pretty boring. It is. It's an industry that's been around for like ages. And, the average person doing it is in their early to mid 60s, generally and listen, I'm broad brushing here, but generally with an ego the size of Texas. And they'll say things like, meet me in my corner office, but only if you have $1 million of investable assets for us to talk about. And just feel like that's a pretty unapproachable vision. And so we cast a vision that says, I wonder, right, if we can't create a company, right, and create a system where 2 are better than 1 because they get a better return for their labor. And that's actually from the Old Testament, Ecclesiastes 4:9, 2 are better than 1 because they get a better return for their labor And woe is the person who falls without somebody there to pick them back up. And that's what drives, right? The organization that I was in and that I'm building now, right? And that prototypical financial advisor that is the knower of all things and does everything on their own. I wonder, because here's what I know, like I'm bad at most things, right? Like if you look at unique ability versus competence. So we're competent at lots of things, right? I mean, think about college, right? If you went to school, you were in lots of different classes. You were competent enough to get through those classes and get the grade that you needed. But there was always a class or a skill set or something that you found yourself doing in jobs where you're like, holy cow, this is awesome. And here's how I would define it. 4 things. 1, it gives you energy, right? So you think about your day, like what is it that gives you energy? Second thing, it gives other people energy. So when you're doing said thing, other people are like, yes. Third, you can keep getting better, never running out of possibilities for further improvement. And number 4, you suspect that you could be the best in the world at it. And I think each of us, right, are gifted in some way, but we each have different unique abilities. And so what we found, right, in building a company and casting that vision, we'd have people that would feel inadequate. They'd say, well, I can't do this, or I don't know this, or whatever it is. So we built a company that says, we want your unique gifts. And once we understand what those unique gifts are, we're going to put you in a place to succeed. And we're going to put other people around you that have different gifts. For example, right? Excel spreadsheets are not my thing, but I've got an analyst that I work with that puts Excel spreadsheets in front of me that will blow your mind. I'm like, this is amazing. And they're like, I mean, it's just an Excel spreadsheet. There's like the pivot table and I can get you over here. And I'm like, I don't know. I just think it's amazing. And that's what gets me so excited about business, is because I meet different people all day long and I learn about their situations, clients, and I hear how they've killed it in business. And they're way different than I am. But you see, like each of us has a gift. If we apply it right correctly, then man, we feel fulfilled in the work that we're doing, and we're surrounded by people that help us get there. Now, you didn't ask for this, but I think the close second, right, to casting a vision is values, right? So here's the thing, and I didn't make this up, right? But if Walt Disney said, when values are clear, decisions are easy. So I'll do a lot of speaking, right? Talking. And this is just an FYI. And I'll ask groups of 10 or 500, what is your number one personal value? You know what I get every single time? Honesty. And so you know what that tells me? That tells me that people are lying to people a lot, all the time, right? Because doesn't it seem like from a value standpoint, your personal value, like honesty would be like, yes, that is number one, like clearly, like everybody should be, right? So anyway, how important is it, right, that you're working for a company or you've built a company that says, this is what we stand for. This is the operating system for how we're going to behave within the organization, right? So we came up with values, right? These are things, we took our leadership team off site and we banged heads together and we said, what is it that we believe? And then we came back and we aligned all of our decisions and behaviors with our values. I'll give you an example. Teamwork is one of our values. And you're like, wow, that's a real, man, teamwork. But here's how it plays out, right? Here's how it plays out. This is 2 are better than 1. One of my VPs, Boston, calls me the other night. He's like, Matt, hey, listen, I got an interview in 7 minutes, right? But my wife's family is in town and they want to have dinner early. Can you cover me? I got you. You go do that. That's what you need to do. And when I'm on the ground, right, if I'm working with other compelling people and I call them and I say, listen, I need your help on this. I got you, Matt. I got you. We got you. We know what's up. But you see, that starts with the compelling vision, right? To be a magnet to attract the right people within the organization. Because, there is a scenario, right? If we hire people and they're not connected to a vision, but they're connected to a paycheck and a job title or whatever it is, that they don't answer that phone call. And here's what happens. When someone doesn't answer that phone call, you have to go to, right? You see how it's like a spiraling thing? And when that happens over and over and over again, you start to feel that void, right, in your life. And I don't want to feel that way at work. I want to have people in my organization that take care of each other. Like, I got you, whatever you need. So again, vision casting, right? Here's where we're going. And I don't want to say that you have to have a compelling vision, because I learned, I mean, you do, right? But it doesn't have to be for everybody. Are you with me on that? So like, one of my really good friends, his name is Jeff Davidson, great mentor to me. He runs a company called Camp Gladiator, often referred to as CG. And some of you might know it, right? Because they've expanded like crazy. Great mentor to me. Jeff told me once, he said, listen, the company that I built and the company that you're going to build, it's not for everybody. But man, does it mean a whole heck of a lot to the somebodies that work here. You with me on that? Like, you may tell me about your business, right? And like the what of what you do. And I'm like, cool. I mean, it's not like my gig, but like, yeah, like, that's awesome. So, but you got to feel it. You with me? Like, you got to feel it, because if we're out there recruiting folks to come join what we're after, the mission that we're on, if they're like, yeah, I mean, that sounds good. Sounds okay. I don't know. This might not, yeah, this
Wrong
might not
person.
be, yeah.
I think it's interesting, right? And I think you guys can appreciate why I love Matt, because charismatic leader, cast the vision. And the key piece here is, I talk about values a lot. And, the tool that leaders have to understand inside companies is the real values of a company are the stories that are told when you're not sitting at the lunch table. And so if you're not giving people those stories, for instance, the story that you just told about Boston, being in a tight spot, needing help, picking up the phone, yes, I got you, right? We have to constantly be telling those stories, because here's the value, but here's what it means. It's not just words on the wall. It's how we act. It's how we behave. It's how we treat each other. And it's how we feel day in and day out when we go home. And I think that's the most important piece of the values. You can't just say, oh, it's teamwork. No, here's what teamwork means inside 49 Financial. This is what it means when Matt Kleinrock is interviewing someone and wants to understand his values and his principles, and what the person who's being interviewed, what they look like and what they're thinking about. And so Matt wanted to come on. I'm gonna let you come on, Matt Kleinrock. He wanted to talk about the application of values, right? Particularly in hiring, because when you are trying to establish values and maintain the values, what are some of those things that we need to be thinking about? And Matt, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but.
Well, no, I mean, I ask because I love what Matt says, and I love talking about values, right? I've created what I call guiding principles. It's the same thing, right? We have 10 for the whole company that I hope we expand on and end up to 20 or 30. And they're just behavioral, emotional, intelligent cues and things to manage with, discuss, right? Obviously, they're not perfect. They are up on the wall. Hopefully, they're not just up on the wall, right? But my question for Matt is on the values thing, where I feel like at times I struggle, or we struggle in general, is, okay, we have these 5 values that are huge to us, right? Like, one of ours that's big is attitude is everything, right? We are in a deadline driven, stressful business. So attitude is everything is big. Another one for us is hold yourself first, then others accountable. Because I'm big at, I don't like people pointing the finger. You're in a situation, look at yourself. What can you control? Then you go solve problems with people. So first, Matt, is one, when you're hiring, how do you decipher whether these people truly have these values, or even if they really don't have them, whether they really can adapt and respect them, right? And they can walk into those and they feel like in the back of their head are like, is this complete BS? I don't care. Or how do you decipher that? It's so difficult to say this person is a team player, this person has a great attitude. I mean, those things I find very difficult.
Yeah. Matt, it's so good to see you, brother. Looking forward to chopping it up when we're back in Jax. I love that. Attitude is everything. And then what I was thinking about, personal responsibility or responsible mindset, right? That we bring to what we're doing. And I would give you two things. One, and this is just a recent example. We had a hire, this happened yesterday. And we use a program called Greenhouse, right? Which gives us an analysis of how many people touched that candidate through the interview process. And so I like to go back, and look at the notes, who started the conversation, how many people were involved. 7 different people within the organization had a conversation with this person. Now, it can vary in time, right? It could be a 15-minute peer interview. It could be another managing partner from another office that spent 30 minutes with them. It could be someone from HR, right? For some of the things that, we may miss. I'm not a details person, right? So I want to make sure that I'm bringing people, this is that unique ability, right? I want to make sure that on the details part of things, people are delivering that. But I'm sort of getting to my answer, Matt. Within that, after every one of those interviews, we put our values in there, and they have to check the box, right? From that conversation, what they have observed from that client from that candidate, and is it in alignment with our values? The second thing that I would say is that it's not all science, it's art, right? In that, what's our gut telling us about this person, right? Are they dropping F-bombs, right, in the interview process? Are they showing up on time, right? So their behaviors, are they in alignment with our values? So for example, a responsible mindset, right? Somebody is late and this is just an example. This is the thing that this is for me. We value people being on time, right? So if they show up 20 minutes late and they say oh yeah, traffic today. It's what? Traffic? Brother, it's beautiful outside. Should have left earlier. Those are sort of things, right? That we're trying to capture in every piece. And we want to make sure that people like Matt, as the CEO, right? You're giving those people that are integrated into that interview process the ability to speak freely, right? Please give me your candid. I'm not looking, because a lot of times we get what they think we want to hear. So is that helpful in some way?
Yeah, I think so. We've used often the people analyzer tool from Traction, right? Where you basically list your values, right? So I think we're, small company, we're 25 people. So being able to get that multiple layer touch point through hiring, we've tried to create it as much as possible, right? And then I think my next question on that for you is sort of now maintaining culture, right? A lot of different cultures nowadays. I hear people talking about culture all the time. I heard our guy, Chris Walker, the other day talking about culture. And then I found out this guy's entire company is remote since day one.
Yeah.
So now I'm I don't want to hear about culture. Okay. So I think that's it. They're so different, right? There is culture in office, hybrid, and remote, but they really vary. So how do you maintain through values all the time, other than constantly speaking them, constantly managing through them? Because obviously there's things that are subtle. There's things, people's perception of things. There's things that I believe here that I think are run through our principles, but they are not, right? So it's kind of any idea on sort of how to maintain that culture with your values? Any tips there?
I love this question, Matt. Okay. So first, I think Jerry had mentioned this, right? It's the easy part of this is when you as the CEO see in your organization behaviors that align with your values. Let's celebrate it, right? Hey, I just want to make a quick call out, whether this is an email, whether this is an all hands meeting, you call it out. That's the easy part, right? The part that we struggle with, I think, is more when we have behaviors that are not in alignment with our values, right? And by the way, this could be people really early on in their journey with your company. We got to call it out first time, every time. Now, I think this was like a problem. I mean, I'm 41 now, right? But I'm going to call it like a millennial problem. I felt like the people when I came into industry that were older than me always had an easier time having difficult conversations. And I was always the one that was like, you got this, right? But that you can't do that. Like we can be cheerleaders for people, but we got to have hard conversations. So Kristen Hadid taught me this, and I use it every time. It's an acronym for calling out behaviors that are not in alignment with values. So here's the example. The acronym is FBI, Frank, Beer, Incentive, FBI. Okay, so let's say that we have a value that's attitude is everything, right? So you see one of your teammates show up, right, at a client event or one of your trade show events, and for the first half of the day, man, their attitude sucks, right? So you pull them aside and you say, hey, Billy, do you have a couple of minutes? Here's the F, right? This is your feeling. How do you feel when you hear that, Matt? You have somebody this is a big event for y'all, right? Half the day, they're in a bad mood. Like, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, it sucks the energy out of a room. I mean, it's killer.
So Matt, listen, you have a couple of minutes? I'll role play with you.
Sure. Yeah, let's do it.
Man, Matt, man, I love you, brother, right? But I got to bring something up to you. One of our core values is that attitude is everything. And I just have to call out, right, that, man, I'm feeling super disappointed and it's just sucking the energy out of the room because you showed up today and I don't know what's going on, right? And I want to support you through this. This is the behavior. Yeah. But when you're showing up like that, right, that's a reflection on all of the team. That's the impact. You with me? Feeling is how you feel. The behavior is the thing that's out of alignment with your value. And then the impact is what that's going to do. And brother Matt, I mean, you show up today and this continues, man, our clients are going to see that. And we've got competitors. They've got options. Here's the most important part, Matt, is this something that you can course correct on like immediately, or is it something that we need to talk about further?
Yeah, so that's great. Just in the sense of the empathy in the beginning. Like, I love how you handled that, right? Like, I tend to have a very direct personality. You know what I mean? So I have to soften everything nonstop all the time. But I love the FBI thing. Because the empathy has to be there when when you're maneuvering and having those discussions, but you have to be able to call out those behaviors that are not aligned. And it's very challenging to do. And people really, really struggle with it. So I really like that a lot. It's great. Honestly, it's a great answer to my question.
And Matt, if it continues, this is Jerry all day long. Yeah. Help me understand. Yeah. Because we had this conversation last week. And again, if it gets to the second or third time and it's a chronic issue, values are clear, decisions are easy, right? Netflix says, listen, this isn't a little league team. Probably a bad example right now as we saw revenue drop for Netflix in the first time. Anyway, they'll figure it out, right? Because they're not a little league team. The people that work there are championship caliber, right? And so anyway, hopefully that's helpful, Matt.
The other piece of this, when you talk about the behavior, the easiest thing that you can do is always tie back to vision, values, or objectives. What I'm seeing from you somehow negatively impacts the vision. This is the journey that we all agreed we were on. The values, this is the operating system of how we said we would treat each other. Or the objectives, this is the short-term goals that we're chasing. And so that becomes not personal about you. It's this shared and joint thing that we don't let each other down. The best teams, the best teammates don't let each other down. And so when you can tie it back to vision, values, or objectives, it's not personal. We just all agreed that this is the thing that we were going to go do, and your behavior is negatively impacting that. So
I have an awesome example, Matt and Jerry, if you have a second. It's super quick, but I just want to put it out there because I think it's so contextual. Okay, it's a great conversation we're having on these values. So one of our values here is that mistakes make us better, right? I'm a big proponent of, hey, you make a mistake, no director, no manager, not myself, anybody is going to crush you. We're going to say, okay, mistake happened. What's next, right? What's the plan? What's the solution? And how are you going to learn from it? So silly me, I'm always just befuddled how everybody is terrified here of making mistakes, right? Now, granted, in our business, because it's deadline driven and all this stuff, it can be exhausting. But what I've learned is that a lot of people are terrified and hide mistakes and worried, yet they've never been yelled at by a director in front of people. They've never been belittled, anything like that. But what happens is, because we all work so close, when mistakes happen, they affect everybody and they become sort of this spectacle across the office. So it's a great example where I put in a value, and I believe that people here should be working freely, not worried about making mistakes, but yet they're still not. And I couldn't figure it out for the longest time. And now I'm sort of just catching it. So I think that goes into, sometimes I think there's things that you just miss. There's language that you miss. There's things that are going on with those values. And that, that for me is just a really good example. So I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Now that you're aware of it, what are you going to do about it?
I'm going to put the elephant in the room.
Yeah. Here's the place where people miss all the time, Matt, is they don't have the courage to do it first time, every time. First time, every time. Now that you see it, and now you see that behavior, you have to be the one that raises the hand and says, hey, here's what I'm seeing. I'm feeling uneasy about it, because one of our core principles is we don't get upset about mistakes. Everyone's going to make them. And the impact is people are playing scared. And that's the antithesis of what we're trying to accomplish here.
Yeah.
And so I say this all the time. It's not calling people out. It's calling people up. Here is the standard that we all agreed on. I'm not calling you out. I'm not doing this to embarrass you. I'm saying we had an agreement, and I'm expecting you to hold on to it. And so you just have to continue to have that courage and that fortitude, and you're winning. Here's how you know you're winning. When other people around you in the organization start saying, hey, Matt, we're a professional organization. We don't show up to meetings late. Please don't be late to your meeting. When other people are doing first time, every time, that's when you know you've won that battle, that you are fully getting your values installed and people are actually living by them. And that is the awesome piece of it.
Yeah. I think it just kind of threw me for a loop, because, you put these values, you talk about them, you feel like, man, why is everybody so afraid to make a mistake? I've never seen what I would believe to be a belittling thing happen, but really what ends up happening is a mistake happens and everybody's trying to solve the riddle out loud in front, and people are like, they just shrink, right? Yeah. They shrink because it's turned into this spectacle. So on my side, we just need to find a way to not turn it into a spectacle and make sure that we're comfortable just problem solving. But sorry, I just wanted to bring that up as, I'm curious.
Superman.
I think it's a great one, right? And, one thing that Isar had asked about, right? So we have these values of how we're going to treat each other. We're a values-driven organization, obviously charismatic leader in this case. You're coaching half of your people out of the organization, right? So we're going to invite them on a different mission because they don't align. And so those are hard conversations. So when you're like getting ready to have those conversations, right? How is it that you go through and figure out to make sure that the people who are left behind are really on board and really motivated?
Yeah, that's a really good question. In that specific example, I'm not thinking about other people. I'm thinking about the person that's in front of me. And I'm really, it's like, it is best for the organization that I'm coaching them into a new opportunity, but I'm really thinking about them. I mean, come on, right? The people that we're having trouble with on an individual basis, that are not aligned to the vision, that are outside of the values, do you think that they're happy in the organization? I'm going to let them free, right? We're going to have a candid conversation and help them see that their talents are better suited in a different place. And so I think if I start thinking about the impact of that in the organization, my mind starts to explode. I only know that I'm super clear on my values and my decision is easy. I'm going to have a conversation with that individual, and then I'm going to be candid, right, with the rest of my leadership team. And by the way, on the back end of that, they're like, geez, you should have done that 3 months ago. Always, right? It's always like been happening before you address it. So I think that's what I'd say to that.
I think the other piece of that, Isar, is there's relief from the other high performers around you who are looking at you, and you are allowing a low performer to continue to stay in your midst.
Yeah.
You know, it's the old Jim Collins, you got to get the right people on the bus. And if you say, hey, you need to be at the bus by 9 o'clock, and what do the high performers do? They get there at 8:55 because they want to allot for traffic so they're not late. And, you know, that's what responsible people with responsible mindsets do. And the person who shows up at 9:05, the leader doesn't say, whoa, 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 hey, you're supposed to be here at 9 o'clock, right? Now, what's the new norm? What is the acceptable behavior? Now everyone can get there at 9:05. And the people who got there at 8:55 are upset that, why did I get here at 8:55? And so it's just that courage and that clarity that you have to have as a leader to, again, first time, every time, when you see it, if you want to be a values-driven organization, the hardest thing that you need to do is to have the courage to do it first time, every time.
If you don't mind, I want to kind of like focus my question, because I am curious, because I was there in a leadership position in 2000 when the tech bubble collapsed. And we had to let go of 60% of the company or let go of the company. These were the two options. So it's even a worse scenario, right? You got to pick the people who are going to keep the company alive, and you got to let go of a big percentage. And my question is more, how do you keep the people who stayed? And I understand what you're saying, Jerry, but it's still, if you let go, it's not 2 or 3 people there. You know, you're pulling out the bad weeds and the rest of the grass is good. That's like now there's half the grass. How do you keep the rest of the team? Because when we did that, again, in 2000, people were like this in the halls for 2 months. Like people wouldn't, because they didn't know when the axe is going to chop again. They didn't know if they're next. They didn't know what's coming. They understand it's a big, even the people that you had conversations with, listen, guys, you're safe. This is it. Because you do this you know this is going to happen. People are A, terrified, and B, it's just a horrible feeling losing half the team. So my question is, what kind of conversations you had with the people who stayed to have them, wow, we're about to go on to the most amazing journey we've been on, versus, holy crap, like what's going to happen next week? That's my question.
Yeah.
So a little bit different, right? You went in and you had a significant layoff. This was, we're looking at low performers and we are pruning the tree as we go on, and we continue to say those are two very distinct situations that you're walking into, for sure.
Yeah, but I think the outcome is very similar. Like a lot of people are living in a very short amount of time. Mm-hmm. The feeling of the people stay regardless of the reason is, and by the way, the reason is the same thing. I want to save the company, right? I want this company to be a high performing, successful company. The reasons were different. We ran out of money. He just said, okay, the current culture is not going to get me anywhere. But the outcome is like, the reason and the outcome are the same reason and the same outcome.
Yeah, Isar, I appreciate the question. I'm trying to it's like PTSD, right? For me to go back, right, to that time frame. It's like, I just want to forget it. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it's difficult. I hear the things that I remember just experiencing. The top performers in the organization would come to me and pull me aside and say, thank you. Super grateful for the work that you're doing, which sort of gave me the affirmation, the things that I was doing. The people that were there that, and these are entrepreneurs, right? That saw the vision, aligned with the values. I just wanted them to know that I had their back. So I just worked like crazy, to show up every day and help and pour into them to help them feel that this was different. It wasn't just words coming out of my mouth. I mean, and so I remember vividly, there was a training I was doing and there was one person there. And I'm thinking to myself, holy cow, I have a super fancy title. You know what I mean? All the dumb stuff that we think about. I have a super fancy title and here I am, doing a training for someone in their first year. But you know what? How we do anything is how we do everything. So I would show up and I'd give the best training I possibly could to that individual. And then there'd be a second person and then a third person. And I would just go home going, I know this is going to work. I believe in the vision that we've cast. The values are clear. We're going to start attracting And then as the recruiting process started to get built, we started to get more predictable results. And so then we had people that were looking at, investment banking and private equity and consulting, which would never have looked at our business prior. And then we started to get some of those. And when that happened, the trade winds all shifted, right? Because if you get the person that you really want, not the person that you can get, but the person that you really want, and we got them in the building. And by the way, this is the person, Jerry, that like, you've got it when they start calling you out. I mean, she would call me and say, Matt, hey, do you have a couple of minutes? I'd be like, holy cow, this is happening to me. Hey, listen, I felt really disappointed, right? When you were on the Zoom call and did this, right? Which is really not what we talked about. And the impact of that is, man, that makes me look small. I'm like, holy cow, you're right. And so again, I think like, as we talk about correcting values and behavior, please, as the leader, put your ego aside and take that feedback, right? I mean, because there is a reaction where you're like, are you kidding? You've been in the business for 3 years and you're telling me? You know what I appreciate about the organization that I'm in right now? Our CEO, Travis Penfield, is probably one of the most talented people I've ever met in my life. Like those moments when you're working with people and you're like, geez, this guy's amazing. He shows up to Zoom. I mean, this has literally happened like last week. He's in a meeting, right? And by the way, this guy broke every record ever, right? At my previous company, like literally every record the company has ever had, ever. He like looks over, right, at his chief of staff and he's like, hey, yeah, like we won this thing last year, right? Like we were the #1 company in the entire like RIA. And his chief of staff was like, yeah, I don't know. He shows up to Zooms, right, with nothing in his background. His office is blank, right? He's an amazing husband. He's super great with his kids. Like, I love it, Jer. He shows up to your mission, right, which is being killer at work and then going home and making it for dinner. That's what I appreciate. You know what I see on LinkedIn now? People with all this stuff behind them, like, look how great I am. That's not my gig, right? Like, because we're trying to replace in our industry ego and greed, right? So like I got inspired, Isar, by that vision and values that we had put in and the feedback from some of those high performers that we were on the right track and affirming that, like the train had left the station, And that took us from dead last to, we were #1 after 4 years going into the last month of the year. We actually finished #4. It's a little depressing, but you know how some organizations are, right? Like throw everything at the wall at the end of the year. Anyway, 40, 20, 10, 4. But again, it wasn't the recognition of like where we finished. It was the people that we did it with. I mean, like I think about all of those people, and although we're wearing different colors now, like I work for a new company, I love those people. I would do anything for those people, right? And like one of the best times that I've had in business. And I hope that for all of us, right? That if we're settling on, old school, like hiring procedure or whatever it is, that's not getting you the people that you want to work with and compelling, change it. Let's do something different. Like, let's hop on a call. Let's figure out how we change and the process to get a more predictable result for you. Because I'll tell you, in these last 45 days with this new company, I'm having more fun than I ever have. And listen, this is clunky. I work for a startup, right? Like it took 2 weeks to get an email address. Like it's clunky, but the work that I'm doing, and some of it's anecdotal at this point, but the work that we're doing and the people that I work with, I mean, that's fun.
And, and it's so interesting, Climb Rock talked about this, and I think it's the thing that I look at inside organizations, because when I do get invited inside organizations, people say to me, my people are amazing. You're going to be blown away by them, right? And then I spend some time inside the organization, and some of the things that we talk about, the accountability, the clarity, the communication, the execution, and they realize, wow, I have a lot of 5s and 6s in my building, and I didn't even realize what the standard of performance could possibly be. And what I find is that once you start getting those 10s into your organization, the speed at which you can move is incredible, because those people, FSO. They figure stuff out. They do things differently than the 5s and 6s who are timid and scared and need to be held by the hand to do anything to move forward. It's like, no, make mistakes, go forward fast, and we'll figure all of it out together. One of the things I think that would be interesting, Matt, specifically, how did you find 10s, right? Like, what was the process? Because you implemented a specific process. I mean, even down to when people were showing up to the office, the valet guy at the front door greeting them.
Yeah. How do we want people to feel throughout that process is what we thought about a lot. And so, like, for example, when they would show up to our office, we were connected to a hotel. It was a little weird, but we would ask them, right, to utilize the valet. And we had gotten to the valet, which was the same team, right, all the time. And we had given them very specific language. So for example, like, Jerry's a top candidate, that we had coming in. They would show up at the valet. Jerry's door would open. Jerry would walk out. They'd say, "Oh, Mr. McNamara, we've been expecting you, blank name of company. And Matt and his team are thrilled to meet you. And oh, by the way, it's like the best company that we have in this building. They're amazing people. And for you to be here, they must think the same of you. Good luck today in your interview." So, like, those little things that we can do to be intentional about that experience is what we found that the 10s wanted. I played soccer in college. I wasn't highly recruited, but Clint Dempsey I played with at Furman was arguably one of the best American soccer players ever. And our coach was a heck of a recruiter. I mean, I went to Furman University, folks. Like, it's a good school, but half of you have probably never heard of Furman before. In 1 year, he got 7 under-17 US national team players, including Clint Dempsey, one of the best American soccer players ever. Heck of a recruiter and an experience, right? That through that process, they felt like, I feel great about this. That's inspiring to me. By the way, I went to my alumni event. This is what I'm talking about. Get creative. I was at my alumni event, right? The other week, Clint was on campus. So Clint popped into a couple of my interviews. I'm like, "Hey, here's Clint," right? My coach got on an interview and was like, "Who are we visiting with? Let me tell you about Matt," right? So the more creative we can get to get the people that we want in the building, let's do this.
I think it is creativity. People don't bring that conscious intention to their recruiting. And yet we hope we get the 10s to come in to feel really, I'm in the right place here and now. One of the other things that you did was creating a day one experience. So when people showed up to the very first day on the job, what was the process that you guys walked through? Because I think so many companies don't bring any intention. They literally walk over, flip on a light, and say, "Here's your office." Yeah. What did you guys do differently there?
Well, I just remember my first day at the other company. I walked in, no one even knew that I was showing up, right? They're like, "Who are you?" I mean, this was really bad. Like, we started it like really bad. And I went through that day, like, because there was no plan, right? So we started with, how do we want them to feel when they're driving home that night? And who do you think they're going to call? Their wife, their husband, their parents? What do we want them to say? And I don't know, Jerry and I came up with, like, we want them to say, "I can't believe that I'm working here." So we tried to create a day that would crescendo with that moment, right? So everything was intentional, like every bit of it, right? So the people that we had at the lunch, the making sure that they had their computer and it worked, so that they didn't have to get on the line with tech, right? And spend 2.5 hours trying to get email. By the way, I should tell my current company this, but we're a startup. Listen, it's going to take a little while to get these systems in place, but we wanted to create an experience not only in that first day, but then we worked on the week, right? To make sure that they had the tools that they needed to be successful. And oh, by the way, like, we didn't always have it right, But then we go to them afterwards and say, okay, how'd you feel? Like, what do we need to do differently? How do we need to improve this process? And they would tell us, they're like, yeah, Wednesday was like light, you know? So that gave us feedback to continually refine that process to get a better result.
I think that's, if there's one area that every company could dramatically improve other than the actual hiring process, that day one piece can create such a dynamic difference for how people feel about the company. And did I make the right decision? Did I make the right choice? Especially in this environment where there's lots of choices out there. And, you know, heck, I even get recruited on LinkedIn. Today was for a kinder care place. And I was like, I don't think that one's for me, but it does happen. Listen, everyone, if you guys have any questions for Matt, you can put them in the chat, or you can hop on. I want to talk just a little bit, you know, because I'm always interested in high achievers, right? So you came through, and doing some culture changing is really hard to do. It really is hard to do. What are the things that you did to take care of yourself to make sure that you had primed the pump, that you were ready to perform every day? Because it's like a street fight going in when you're doing culture changing in a high growth environment.
Yeah, I think you helped me with this a bunch. I mean, the morning routine I think is really important for leaders, right? People that run organizations, Oprah Winfrey, Mr. Rogers, and farmers, they all start at 5 a.m. So I figured, you know, that'd be good for me. That's when I start. 4:20 now. So I'm just moving it back. You know, if you've got kids, you know why, right? Like that's the quiet time that you have. So for me, it's like, okay, the first domino is me getting up, right? And then I drink, you know, huge thing of water, right? And then I'm off to either a class or on the Peloton, and I go hard, like 45 minutes, like hard. And then when I get back, my reward is coffee, and then meditation. And then, you know, I look at my goals for the day, right? Like, okay, what do I want to do? How do I want to show up today, right? And listen, by the way, like, I hate when people talk about this and you're like, is that real? On most days it is 80%, right? But like my daughter was sick earlier this week, right? So she was up at 5:30. Some things get haywire, right? I mean, that's what we do, right? Like as leaders, is like constant, like we got a plan, but if it doesn't work, then we pivot. The other thing, I was showing up to, I mean, I love to work. Like I love work. I love my family too, though. So, you know, when Jerry and I were sitting down, he looked at my calendar. He's like, brother, you don't have any like space at all in this thing. So we got date nights involved, right? We got white space in there. We ensured that we were being intentional because I'm trying to take new ground in every area of my life. Now, listen, again, this is a plug for Jerry. Or if you're not working with a coach, find a good coach that cares about you. Because when shit gets hard, like Jerry picks up the phone and he's like, I'm like, man, I'm in a slump. Like, I don't understand why. And I think the only tragedy is when we try to go through those things on our own and get ourselves out on our own. We need two are better than one. That's not a shameless plug for what we do, but you could apply that not only to your personal life, but I think in business as well. So yeah, I'm super grateful for that. And I'm feeling really good right now. I'm doing this thing called 75 Hard. I'm on day 16 of it. And I just really love how, like, my biggest takeaway from this is that the things that you need to do in 75 Hard are not hard, right? Like it's 10 pages of reading, but I love his theory on this. It's like, we cut corners a lot, like, right? Like, so we'll be like, I'm going for a 45-minute run and we do a 37-minute run. And I love his thought process of like, no. If you do a 37-minute run, you got to go back to 1. So like, I love that. I'm like, okay, that's super binary. Like, I just can't cheat. And so that's helpful for me. So anyway, I wanted to share that with you because that's working well for me right now.
Okay, yeah. So good to see you again, Matt. I saw that you were hosting this and it was something very interesting to me. So, but anyways, as a college student, I'm about to go into the workforce next year. So like, you can't really see a lot about company culture. Like, you can only see what's in one day, which is not enough. Like, you need to be there for a year or 2 years to really understand what it is. So like, is there something that I could look into about a company culture that could help me understand, like, this might be a good fit, or this is a toxic work environment, or this is not something I'm very comfortable with, or this is something I really enjoy, and this is something that, I can really grow and bond with these people a lot?
Yeah, Aaron, that's a good question. And great to see you again, Aaron. I was judging a sales contest at the University of Florida, and this is where I met Aaron, and did just a great job in that contest. So great to see you again. Yeah, I do think it's tough. We try to help with that by exposing candidates to multiple people in multiple seats within the organization. And one of the things that we like to do is a shadow day, right? And again, it doesn't give us the full picture, but I don't know that you'd ever get the full picture without actually being in it. And here's the thing, I think people say this a lot. They're like, life is short. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I talk to college students a lot, and I remind them that no, for most people, life is really long, actually. So listen, when you, like Aaron's like, I don't know if I believe that. Well, I mean, at 21, right? Life expectancy, 78, right? So like, that's a long time to me. And so I think there's so much pressure on college students to get it right out of the gates. I mean, I think some of it is right, like figuring out what you are called to do. I talk about love what you do, right? Find your unique ability. I mean, I think there are seasoned people on this call that have figured it out, but man, like it took me 15 years to figure, right? Like what my lane is. So Aaron, I wouldn't put too much pressure on yourself. Art and a science to that as well. Yeah, totally. Esar's done a ton too.
I think, a piece of that, Aaron, would be, KA talked about look at employee engagements online. Glassdoor is one. I mean, there's company review sites. One of the things that I would encourage you to do is reach out to people inside the company. Start looking and seeing what people are talking about. Are they even talking about their work, right? Because I talk about my work all the time. Why? Because I love what I do. I get to work with the most amazing people who are interesting and compelling and trying to do amazing things. That's flipping cool. So it's what I talk about a lot, other than, my super hot wife, Rachel, and kids. And, I think you can find out a lot around. I would even ask to hop on calls with people, right? Because it's like a recommendation. No one's going to give you a recommendation and say, yeah, you can call this person. And I never pick up the phone and call a recommendation and expect to get a terrible report on that person, right? And so even though a company is giving you lots of looks around the board, I would tell you, connect with someone on LinkedIn and say, hey, I'm considering joining your company. Would you be willing to hop on a call with me for 10 minutes? I have 3 questions to ask you. I have used this tactic, Aaron, this whole, I have 3 questions, I need 10 minutes. And I have spoken to hundreds of CEOs who have taken my cold email and hopped on a call with me. And so you will be surprised when you stay humble and hungry and just say, I need your help. Because people's first inclination as a human being is, sure, how can I help you? And so be open to that, but do your research for sure.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys, for your help and your input as well.
You're welcome, man. You're welcome. Matt, let's close out with, what's one thing that you do every day that you think every leader should also do?
Yeah, I think it's a little self-serving, but I think it's expressing gratitude towards the people that you work with. It's certainly helpful for me, but man, in the work that we do, there's so many people that touch the work that we do to get to the end result that make it this beautiful thing. And so a lot of us on the call, right, are really hard charging, like go, 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 right? And so that text that you send, that voice text that you send, that email appreciation CC'd, right, their team lead, like calling out the things that are in alignment with values, golly, helpful for me, but I think you're going to lift somebody else up, right? So the more that we can do that, I think the better.
There is never an ending upside to gratitude. Gratitude is just such an amazing thing. It's even, the 9 principles of personal performance. principle 6 is we all stand on the shoulders of giants. I hate when people say like, oh, that's a self-made person, self-made man. It's like, that's the most ridiculous, egotistical thing I've ever heard in my life.
That's crazy.
Because boy, people gave me a million chances. People invested in me. Maria, Roanne, Isar, I mean, they all helped put on this show. I don't do this by myself. And it's a total like crock of baloney when people start buying into their own BS and think that they do it themselves. And so stay humble, put your ego to the side. Ego is always the enemy. And tell people, I am so grateful for your belief and your investment in me. I was able to hire a researcher earlier today. And I said to him, thank you so much for your belief in what it is that we're doing, because we're on a mission to positively impact 5 million people over the next 5 years. He was like, thank you for the opportunity. It's like, no, really, thank you for believing in me, because we're going to go do this. And so super fun when you get that piece right. Matt, thank you so much for coming on, sharing your wisdom, sharing your journey. Super great stuff. Lots of things to think about as you go back into your companies and just lead. I think the one thing that I always am inspired is when values are clear, decisions are easy. And I will tell you, I know no better values-driven leader than Matt Foxhall. And I'm at a point in time in my career where I don't have to work for people. I get to go work for myself. But if I was going to go work for someone, Matt Foxhall would be at the top of that list. That's how much love and appreciation I have to go follow that guy into making a difference in the world. So super fun. So last pieces. So if you haven't joined the Facebook community, best places to lead, right? Go join the private Facebook community. I want to get over 50 members today. So please help me do that. Second thing is, some of you have been showing up for quite some time. I am so grateful for all of you. One thing that Alex Sanfilippo, who is a great podcast guy, he said, you have to ask people for reviews on your podcast. So if you can go to Apple Podcasts and leave a review for best places to lead, that would be amazing. I think I have 2 so far. And we usually have between 15 and 30 people here every week. So I should have more than 2. But just let me know what we can do better to serve you guys. And I want to invite you for next week. So Katie McLaughlin, she's going to talk about how deliberate leaders create engaged teams. So we're going to continue this approach of conscious intention. How do we continue to show up for our people so that we can support them, love them, and unlock the very best that they do in their work each and every day? So I'm grateful for you guys, and I hope you have a great rest of your Thursday.